Welcome, and I'm happy to present this presentation, virtual tour of the Temple Mount, the Holy Temple, and a day with the Kohanim. So, just as you know, this is a three-part course. Okay, this week we are going to take an archaeological tour of the Temple Mount. Next week, the Holy Temple itself. And then the third lesson, we are going to take a trip with the Kohanim. We are going to follow the priest inside the temple to see their schedule and what was going on over there. In order to appreciate the temple and the structure of the temple, you just have to understand, first of all, where you are, and that takes us to the Temple Mount and the archaeological finds of the Temple Mount, which is what we are going to focus tonight. So, let's begin with a little bit of history. Here what you have is a recent picture of the Temple Mount. So when I say Temple Mount, right away, you wonder, where is the mountain? I can understand the temple was once there, but where is the mountain? There is no mountain, there is one large platform surrounded by walls and all kind of houses. Where is the Temple Mount? So this is actually something we're going to discuss a bit later, but before, let me back it up. This mountain, whatever mountain, is also called Har HaMoriah, Mount Moriah. Mount Moriah is known in history for many things, including this is on top of this mountain, precisely at this spot where precisely at this spot where Abraham took his son Isaac and was requested by God to offer Isaac as an offering known as the binding of Yitzchak, Akedat Yitzchak. It took place, as the Bible tells us, on Har HaMoriah, on Mount Moriah, which is also the Temple Mount. On that mountain, Cain and Hevel brought their offering. Cain and Hevel were the two children of Adam and Eve, and the story goes with their offerings and the whole story behind it. It took place on Mount Moriah. Something else to know is that Noah, when Noah came out from the Teva, Noah built a mizbeach, an altar on this mount, Noah. This is also the place where Adam Arishon, Adam, was created on and from. So just imagine the history of mankind began there on Mount Moriah. Now, through the years, yes, a question.
Is it a flat area or is it elevated?
Okay. So since you asked the question, I was about to clarify that a bit later, but since you asked the question, I'm going to clarify it right now. Yes, what you see over here from here, this wall, this is the northern wall. This is here, the western wall. This is the southern wall, and over there is the eastern wall, okay? All along. So basically, all this is a flat area surrounded by walls, as you can see it. And so, by nature, definitely elevated from this part of the city.
Okay.
From this part of the city. Just so you know, in case you've been in Israel, here is the spot of the Kotel, of the Western Wall. This is the Kotel Plaza. This is where people gather and go to pray every day. This is basically a portion, we're going to talk about that soon, a portion of the walls of the Temple Mount. Okay? I'm going to clarify what that means soon. But yes, it is a flat area that is elevated from the other part of the city.
I thought, but I don't know if I'm right, that there was a mount, then they built wall and filled it in,
very good.
Flat.
Very good, very good. We will see that actually in a few slides. Okay. So, recently, for the past 200 years, there have been extensive archaeological work around the Temple Mount. You can see over here, this is the area of the most intensive archaeological research, which is the southern side of the Temple Mount. So this would be the western side, this would be the southern side, and the corner of the western to the southern walls of the Temple Mount is where most of the archaeological research is taking place. Okay? So many of those things, many of those spots that we are going to discuss are actually spots that are around this area, which has been discovered through the archaeological find of the past 200 years, but even more recently, the past 50 years or so. Let's begin with the Western Wall. Okay? The Western Wall that you can see over here is only a portion of the wall. In fact, below the plaza, there is another few meters that is going down, and this is something you can see when you go through the Minharot HaKotel, when you go through the Kotel tunnels. You can actually go down below the surface of this plaza and see how the walls is continuing several meters under the ground, very, very, very deep. This is the Kotel. This is considered today one of the holiest places in Judaism. This is the place that thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands of millions of Jews are going there to pray. Jews are going there to pray every day. There are celebrations taking place there, bar mitzvahs, bat mitzvahs, and all kinds of ceremonies. This is a holy place because of the proximity to the Holy Temple, because of the proximity, as you will see soon, to that spot of the Holy of the Holiest. Okay? But something I want to clarify first is, this wall isn't part of the actual temple. The temple was destroyed by the Romans, the second temple. There were, as you know, two temples. The first temple was built by King Solomon, and then 400 years later, after King Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonians destroyed and exiled the Jewish people. Eventually, the second temple was rebuilt. It was rebuilt through the help of Ezra, the scribe, through Ezra and Nehemiah, through Hordus, which we're going to speak about, King Hordus, but then was eventually destroyed by the Romans. The Romans destroyed and burnt completely the temple. So from the temple we have nothing left. What we do have is a portion, some portions of the Temple Mount walls which remained, so to say, intact. This is a portion of it, and this has been a spot which has been dedicated by Jews to go and pray. But as you'll be able to see, there is still more of that western wall that continues along here, as well as the southern wall that continue on the side, and along as the eastern wall as well. There is still some other portions that remains until today of the Temple Mount walls. Why this particular spot? Because this is a spot that is one of the closest spots to the Holy of the Holiest. The Holy of the Holiest sat on top of the Temple Mount, sat on the big plaza that you saw earlier, on the big surface that you saw earlier, and the closest to the Holy of the Holiest that we can get to in normal condition would be that spot, and this is why it has been considered the holiest place and where Jews are going to pray. There is an actual spot where if you go down through the Minharat HaKotel under the Arab villages and homes, you will get to a closer spot, but obviously this isn't some place where you can gather every day thousands and thousands of Jews. This has been digged under Arab villages, Arab homes, and this would be a spot that would actually be exactly across the Holy of the Holiest. So in fact, that would be the holiest place you can get to, but let's leave that a little bit for later. So again, this is a portion of the walls of the Temple Mount, the western one, closest as possible to the Holy of the Holiest, and this is why it gets its significance in Judaism. Now, how we found out about the walls of the Temple Mount? Meaning, it was a time after the Romans destroyed the Holy Temple. The whole city and the whole area was covered with dirt, with garbage, with stuff. Meaning, all the way until the top was all covered with dirt. No one knew actually where the temple was, where the Temple Mount is, if there are any walls, if there are anything. This was all covered. About 400 years ago, King Suleiman was king at that time, the Ottoman Empire, and ruled over Jerusalem. And King Suleiman wanted to find out where is the spot of the Holy Temple. So he's looking around, he's in Jerusalem, but he doesn't know where he is. And then he sees a woman, and she carries the garbage. And she moves and walks towards, he says, where are you going? She says, I'm going to throw the garbage. She says, what type of direction are you going? She says, well, don't you know? The Romans, back then, have established a tradition, almost kind of a rule, that it's part of the Constitution, that when you get garbage and you're about to dispose of your garbage, you have to go to that particular spot, which was once the spot of the Holy Temple, and this is where you dispose of your garbage. Suleiman heard that and he says, I got it. He goes over, he follows the woman, and sure enough, he sees the place where she disposed of the garbage, and this is where people dispose of their own garbages. So Suleiman says, you know, and he understood the holiness of the place. He says, who would like to help me to dig all this garbage and reveal what is behind, what is underneath? And what he did, he threw coins of gold. And he says, whoever would like to work and begin to dig will get some coins. And he threw more coins, and people came to help. And King Suleiman himself started to dig. And if the king himself is digging, can you imagine how many people came to help? It was over 10,000 people who came and began to dig and discovered what was underneath the holy spot of the temple and the portions of the Temple Mount walls that have remained intact.
But mother-in-law, you know, very, very smart. Right?
Sorry?
By the Romans.
Yes.
I mean, that was
You see that?
a very smart thing to do. We don't want to do nothing with the temple and garbage.
Exactly. Exactly. All right. This is the Bet HaMikdash, or the Holy Temple, the second one that was built by Horus. It carries the name of Horus for its main reason, because it was Horus who created this magnificent expansion of the Holy Temple. In fact, the Holy Temple began, the second one, we're speaking about the second one right now, and the one that we are going to speak all the time, because this is the one we are going to study. These are the archaeological research and finds. We've got not much from the first temple, but during the second temple era, King Horus wanted to expand and make the temple the most central and beautiful place in the world. He was a king. He was appointed by the Romans. And more about Horus and his personality we'll speak about next week when we go through the actual structure of the temple. He was very intense, and he had all kinds of moods. He was a very cruel king, a very cruel person. He did all kinds of things which we're going to talk about next week. But some of the good things he did, and that was one of his hobbies, creating magnificent buildings. I mean, if you have been in Israel, Caesarea, a palace there was Horus. Masada was Horus.
Herod.
Herod, all right. King Herod. So in English, here we go. King Herod is King Horus.
Okay.
Okay.
Now I understand.
He was crazy about buildings and about all kind of magnificent building. And in any case, he decided that as an atonement, as a goodwill for kind of repairing the cruelties that he committed against the Jewish people, he's going to expand the temple and create most magnificent building. So, the temple itself is on top. Let me get my... There is the temple. The tall building that you see, this is the Holy of the Holiest. But all that is a temple. So the temple actually sat on a very small portion of the Temple Mount. Now, here's the secret for the Temple Mount. There was once underneath here a mountain. And it's still there, by the way. It was a mountain. Upon which God asked Shlomo, King Solomon, Shlomo HaMelech, to build the first temple. And the first temple was built, surrounded by a large plaza, not as large as this one, as much as the top of the mountain can take. King Herod wanted to expand that. Now, how do you expand the temple plaza or the temple surface and temple mount surface when you've got a mountain? I mean, at one point you get to the edge of the mountain, you can't build anymore. So he came up with a brilliant idea. And he says, this is what we're going to do. We are going to build walls all around the temple mount, the mountain. And we are going to expand the surface of the plaza of the temple mount, and we are going to fill up the empty spaces on all corners of the mountains, on all sides of the mountains, with rooms, structures. And with that, he did something which at that time was considered to be a brilliant piece of architecture. And with that, he expanded the entire plaza of the temple, which, as you can see, became this huge place, surrounded by the four walls of the Temple Mount. Now, going back, our kotel, the kotel that we are going to pray right now, is actually right over here. Okay? But inside there is actually a mountain. Now this is therefore this is all got the name of Har HaBayit, the Temple Mount. Now the Temple Mount is the name for this entire structure that was built all around the temple, all around the mountain. Is that clear? Just want to go back to the original picture. Here is it. This is the most recent picture. So this is the Temple Mount that was built by Horus, that was expanded by Horus. And some of the, so that's the kotel, some of those walls are still remaining until today. So now we said that he has to fill up those spaces with rooms. You can see here an illustration, and here you can see an actual picture of those rooms. Those rooms are under what you can see on the surface, obviously, and they're filling up this space that is empty between the mountain and the walls of the Temple Mount. There were several reasons why Horus, King Herod, asked to build these rooms instead of just filling up with dirt, right? One of the reasons is, halachically speaking, from a purpose of Jewish law, as you'll be able to appreciate in the next few lessons, a major emphasis was put on the laws and the concept of purity and impurity. Which means, in order to get to the temple, you had to be pure. And purity has got his own set of laws. Give you an example. If you touched a dead insect, you received impurity, a certain level of impurity. If you touched a dead body, you received a level of impurity. If you were in the room, in the same room where a dead body was there, you would receive and then depending on certain moments in your life, you would be considered impure and would have to wait a certain process of purification. In any case, the laws of purity and impurity are quite complex, and this was a major part of the lifestyle in those days, because you had to be pure in order to go to the temple. So, some of the laws of those set of rules: if, let's say, there is a dead body that is buried somewhere, the impurity of the dead body is bokea ve'ole, is going up until the heaven. And if you pass unknowingly, you didn't know that there was a dead body there, you didn't know someone is buried over there, and you passed over that dead body, you actually received impurity, and sometimes unknowingly. However, there is an exception to the rule. If there is a roof, if there is a room with a roof, that will kind of stop the impurity to go further. So that means that if it was filled up with dirt, and let's say there was somebody who was buried there, and the impurity is going up all the way, and everyone is going there to go to the temple and gets impure by the dead body, you can imagine the problem that this could have caused. So what he did, I guess also with the instruction and the guidance of the sages at that time, creating rooms, all kind of rooms, one on top of the other, so the impurity will not go through all the way up, because it will stop at the first room. It will stop at the first ceiling of the first room. That was one reason. Another reason, practical. This was a storage place. They were able to store all kind of things. Another reason was also to be able to use that dirt for other purposes. Okay, so every single detail was thought through. In this case, you can appreciate some of it.
And the holes? The holes on the wall?
This?
No.
On top?
Yeah, that's a hole.
Yeah. Well, that was, I guess, some part of the building. I'm not sure what it is. Yeah, these are holes that could have been added later on. Okay, not every single details may have been from the time of King Herod. It could have been. It went through many different periods of times. Let me just give you a brief description of those walls. So going back here, we have so that's the Temple Mount Plaza that is continuing, and then you have the walls were built at the edges to support this entire structure. When they built walls, they would dig all the way until they hit rock bottom. And they would dig as much as it takes until they hit the actual rock. And that is in order for those walls to remain as steady and strong as possible. Some of it, they digged and they found out that the walls are actually going down sometimes 20 meters. And above the foundation, there is the wall that continues for 12 meters. So imagine a wall that was built of about 32 meters with a width of 5 meters. 5 meter width and 32 meters building a wall. So 20 meters of foundation and 12 meters of the actual wall. The British, when they came to Palestine, they wanted to dig and to find a little bit what it was, and they had to dig until rock bottom, until the end of the foundation, to be able to begin to see what was going on around the Temple Mount. So what you see over here is is actually one of the only spots where you can see the difference between before King Herod's era and after King Herod. Meaning, I'm trying to use my. Okay, it's working. So, this is the eastern wall of the Temple Mount. This one over there is the northern wall. This is the western wall, and my phone is not big enough. Now I need an iPad. Yeah. Okay. This over here is the, trying to get, yeah, exactly, right here, this is the southern wall. Now, this wall, Horus didn't touch. This wall, the eastern wall, actually remained the same wall since the time of King Solomon, of the first temple. What he did is he expanded, as we said, okay, he expanded it, and obviously he created this wall, and he expanded also on the western side, and he expanded definitely on the southern side, but the eastern wall remained where it was. Which means that when you go to both sides of the eastern wall, right here, and then right over here, you can see a difference in the type of stones. And this is what you see over here. These were the stones from the Temple Mount walls from the time of King Solomon, of the first one. These are the stones from the time of King Herod that were added to the walls of the eastern side, as you can see over here. So what you see here is actually that spot right here. All right, now we are turning and we are going to the western southern side of the Temple Mount. As I mentioned earlier, that side over here is where most of the archaeological find took place. Archaeological research took place, and some of it is extremely fascinating. Let's begin with the size of the stones. Let's take a look at that stone over here. Try to figure out where it ends. The small stones weighs about 2 tons. This big one, give you some measurement. The length is about 10 meters. The width is about 2 meters. And the height is about 1 meter. Guess how much it weighs? 10 tons. Huge stones. Huge. And this is how they built, Horus built the walls of the Temple Mount all around. Let me ask you a question. Why would you think he would use such a big stones? By the way, these are stones that are considered some of the biggest in the entire world, used in buildings. Why would you think King Herod would use such a huge stone?
To make it last.
To make it last?
Yeah.
And smaller stones?
And the importance.
The importance of
the importance of the size. So it is important, huh? If you put little stones. Well.
Okay, maybe that too little, but maybe not as big. Why that big? 10 tons. Can you imagine?
How did they maneuver it?
Oh, that's another question. So this is what we're going to talk in in a minute. Okay, how did they move those stones from one place? How did they put them one on top of the other? That's a good question. But the reason why he used such a
maybe against earthquake. I don't know. That's
okay. That's a good reason. That's a good reason. The reason that is brought down is that he wanted to save in energy.
Save energy.
Save energy, and that means because they were so huge and so big, he didn't need to put cement in between the two. In fact, those stones are actually placed one on top of the other. There is no cement, there is garnish, there is nothing in between. If it would have been smaller stones, in order for the wall to actually remain standing, you would have had to use some type of cement. To create cement, you're going to have to burn all kind of things, you have to use trees, you're going to have to use resources, which especially trees in those days in Israel were very limited with the rain and so on and so forth. So in order to save all that things, he used huge stones which did not need any cement, anything that connected the stone with the next one.
So how do we know this? Did he document it?
Oh, very good question. How do we know this? A lot of it we know from Josephus. Josephus Flavius was a Jew. His name in Hebrew was Josephus. And Josephus wrote a book. It's now considered one of the major books of history at that time, describing all kind of things that we know it from that book. We also know it from the Talmud, and by comparing what Josephus wrote and what the Talmud tells us, we're able to get a very, very good picture of what happened at that time.
It's all aligned. It's all aligned.
Oh, you see, it's all aligned, but very, very, very good comment. I'm going to point out something in a few slides that you'll let me know if it's really well aligned.
Okay. Looks that way, right?
From here, yes.
Can I ask you,
Sure.
which year, what year are we? The build of the second?
355 before Common Era, that was exactly the year it was built, and it was destroyed on the year 68 Common Era.
Both were destroyed.
Both were destroyed.
Same period of
No,
time.
no, no.
Date.
Same date, correct. Same date of the calendar. Same day of the calendar, the 9th of Av, which is in a few weeks from now. But the first temple was being built by King Solomon the year 825 before Common Era, and was destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonians, the year 423 before Common Era. Okay? All right. How on earth did they move those stones? Well, there were 4 systems used in order to move them. Number 1, they would put the stone. This is only one stone that you see, and there's dozens of people who are carrying it. They would put the stones on a prepared slat of wood, and then they would attach the stone to it, and then they would schlep. They would just move the stone from one place to the other. Okay? They were pretty busy at that time.
How do you lift it?
Basically, they did very slowly. They would kind of manage to put them onto that pieces of wood, either by digging a bit, so the surface would allow the stone to just be slided. Exactly. They would kind of slide. They would kind of slide the stone on top of those pieces of wood. That would be one way. Another way is they would attach it Again, they would place it on pieces of wood, and they would use cattle to actually move the stone from one place to the next. The other way would be actually creative way, which is in a kind of roulette made of wood, and they would just move it. I believe that some of them get broken with the time, and they had to build a few. This is also a similar idea. Basically, 4 methods of how to move the stones from one place to the other. How did they put the stone one on top of the other? This is what they did. When they got to the first row, it was simple. Then for the second row, they would put dirt in a slanted way after the stone, and then they would pull the stone from on top of the first stone. They would pull the second stone on top of the third one. Then they would go and add more dirt, so they would have the ability to go now up on the second row, and then they would build a longer road and on the third row, and so on until they built, the last row. So this was quite a long, large kind of road that they created, and they would stand on top and schlep slowly the stone until they're able to put the stone on top of the last row. Here what you can see is, you see that a lot in the building of Hortus, and that is around the stone there is this kind of aesthetic little line, little frame that makes the stones really nice and really special in terms of simple architectural design.
Is that how they ended up? Well, I guess they're not so aligned as they appeared.
Sorry?
Is that what the degree of alignment is with the stones on top of each other? Is that how?
Just going to show it right now. Here you see it from the side. Here you see,
okay, so
this is the bottom one, and this is the top one.
I see.
Is it aligned exactly?
Not exactly.
Not exactly.
Close enough.
Close enough. So what you see is that each row went in about 2 centimeters inside, and that was in order to keep the remember, there was no cement between the two. There was in order to keep the wall strong and steady.
Gee, man's, their knowledge of all this is amazing.
So because of that, because of those stones not being really attached to each other in any way, connected to each other in any way, when the Romans came, and they were on top of the Temple Mount, and they decided, we are going to burn the place, we are going to destroy everything. So they went and they destroyed the temple, and then they started to say, let's destroy the Temple Mount and those walls. And they were on top. What they did, in order to break the wall, in order to destroy the wall, what they had to do?
Push it down.
Push it down. They went and pushed down the stones. If you go now to Jerusalem, and that struck me when I was there. It struck me when I was there. You'd see the stones that the Romans pushed, and they still sit there. You can see a picture right here. So you see full stones that came from on top, from the top row, that was pushed by the Romans.
What a sad way to use manpower. Tragic way.
Tragic. But see, when you see that and you're in Israel, it really reminds you, it really reminds you the destruction, what happened. It really puts you into the mood and into the context of what was going on at that time. At the end of the lesson, I'll show you a beautiful picture that I took at a very special moment when I was standing behind those stones, reflecting on, in a way, destruction, and then I saw something else. I was with Malky. I saw something else behind the stones. And I took a picture, and I want to show it to you at the end. In any case, this is a picture of Me'arat HaMachpelah, of the cave of Machpelah in the city of Hebron, where our forefathers were buried. There too, you could see a similarity between the stones. In fact, some people take pictures in both spots, and they take picture at the cave of Machpelah before the walls, and you think they're standing at the western wall. They are not at the western wall, they are at the cave of Machpelah, but you can mix the two because those two buildings were built by the same person, or built by King Herod. He used the same stone, the same style, the same architecture, so they look very, very similar. All right. How's that so far? Interesting?
Yes.
Huh? Learning a lot? We are still at the same corner, western, southern corner. This is western wall, but this is the western wall just before the edge, just before the corner. Just so you see exactly, where we are holding, I'm going to show you a picture we saw earlier. Okay. Now we are standing right over here. Okay? That's the western wall. Over there, after this spot, is the Kotel HaMaravi, where people are going to pray. This is the southern wall. This is where most of the research has been done. We are standing right there. I just want you to know exactly where you are standing. Okay. What do you see over here?
Looks like a ledge.
The ledge, huh? Looks like little teeth coming out from the wall. Well, what you are looking at is the beginning or the remnant of the first bridge in history. The first bridge and one of the largest bridge ever built by men. When I mean men, no machines, no electricity, no technology, by men in history. That is known to be the Robinson Arch. Robinson was a fellow, I'll tell you the exact year, I think in the 1800s, yes, 1838, from America. He was an American researcher and archaeologist. And he was on a trip to Israel. And he was standing right here. Well, this is an illustration. It shows you how this looked like 200 years ago. See, people are standing here, and that was before they digged under. The surface of where people were standing was at this spot, which was right here.
That much?
That much. So this is actually where, at the time of the Holy Temple, people used to stand. But this, remember, was covered up. Now, it was covered up by about 25 layers of different time in history. So you get a layer from the time of the Byzantine period. You get a layer from the time of the Ottoman period. You get a layer, you get all kinds of layers of periods. And as you go, as you go down, you go earlier and earlier in history. And also, I mean, it's sad that this was covered all the time, but in a way, It was good because it preserved many of those spots because it was completely covered for so many years. So, I illustrate a little bit. This is where people are standing today. So, if you visit Israel, you would be standing right here. And this is where people used to stand in the 1800s, right over here. Now, no one realized, no one noticed, and Robinson looks at it and he sees something is sticking out. And he says, hey, this is the arch. This is the bridge that Herod built. This bridge is described as the arch that was going from the city to the top of the Temple Mount. So Robinson realized that we are talking about this.
Oh.
Take a look.
Wow.
People are standing right over here. And you got from the city an arch. A big, huge bridge that was going and that was entering what is known the royal court or courtyard or palace or chamber. Because that spot that you see over here was, let's put it that way, it was the convention center. Okay? This was the convention center. Herders had this dream that the Temple Mount is going to be, the most central place in the world. People are going to come from all over the place and everything. So he built on the southern side a whole long corridor of beautiful rooms and palaces to welcome guests, to welcome people. And this was really the convention center. So people came from the city and they were able to go up and go enter there right straight over there. So what we have today is remnant, as you can see over here, remnant of the arch, and it was named after Robinson, who was the one clever enough to be able to discover that. The length of the arch was about 15 meters, and the weight of it is about 1,000 tons. One of the largest in the world at that time.
What a different history from Canada. Canada doesn't have that kind of history.
Yes, yes.
Brilliant minds those people had possessed.
So, what happened over here? Well, if we continue our trip, this is the remnant of the Robinson Arch. And if you go and look down, you would see three entrances, three doors that are sitting till today, right there. What were those things? What was going on over there? Here's a closer picture. Do you see what's one entrance, second entrance, third entrance? They found there, while digging, coins, old coins. They found peels of fruits. What do you think was going on there?
Market.
Very good. Market. This was Robson Street. Or this was Fifth Avenue. Imagine you owned a spot there to be able to do business. This was the place to be. There's the thousands of people used to come there every day. And imagine during the holidays, all Jews used to come from all over the world. So you had thousands of people used to come there. And people needed a drink, people needed a breakfast, people needed an offering, people needed some salt, people needed some oil, people needed some flour, and so on and so forth. So this was an actual market. So what you actually see over here is remnants of the entrance of certain stores. And here is one of the, probably one of the most significant finds that they found in that spot. Let me give you a little bit of background. While digging, they found a stone, that one, which was a cornerstone, meaning it was a stone that belonged to the corner of a building. And they looked at it carefully, and they saw at the end of the stone, I mean the stone fell down from the top, obviously, so it was cut. But they saw at the end of the stone an inscription, and the inscription goes like this: Lebeit Hatekia, to the house of blowing, Lehach, and the word is cut. And they figured out what it is. And you have to understand when you find such a thing, 2,000 years after this temple was destroyed, it gives you the goosebump. What is it? The Mishnah tells us, the Talmud tells us, there was a spot around the temple. It was a corner, it was a tower, it was a corner. And there the Kohen, one of the Kohanim, had a job. And his job was, every Friday, before Shabbat, every week, he used to go there and blow the shofar 2 times. The first time he used to blow to let know people that Shabbat is coming, so you should stop from doing work. And then the second time he used to blow to announce that Shabbat is coming in.
Oh, coming in? Or
Coming in, meaning in the next few seconds, Shabbat will be in. And that was happening every Friday afternoon. By the way, this is the source for the custom, you could call it. If you go into, let's say, Crown Heights, or Jerusalem, or Montreal, I believe, or any community where you have a significant a number of observant Jews who are living close-knit into one area, you would hear on Friday afternoon a siren. The siren goes out. And twice. The first time to announce people, and you see people running, and then Shabbat is coming. The second time tells you that Shabbat is about. We're not lucky enough to have that siren in Vancouver, but when you have that siren, right, it really feels like Shabbat is coming in, and the roots for this custom, you could call it, is from the Mishnah, is from the Talmud. So now they found the actual stone where the inscription was there, saying that this is the direction to the house of blowing, lehach, and they believe that the end of the word is lehachiz, to announce that Shabbat is coming in. The stone is still there at the same spot where they found the stone, but the inscription, they actually cut the inscription and they brought it in the Israeli museum. So if you're in Israel and you go to visit the Israeli museum, you're actually going to be able to see the original inscription and many other things that they found there while digging, some of the coins and all kind of utensils, all kind of stuff. This is another stone they found there. We can also see at the Israeli museum, and on it says the word korban, offering. You have to understand, this was a major part of the daily busy day in the temple. It was offering, sacrifices, and so on and so forth. So here you can see a stone that clearly attests to that. Here you could see around the Temple Mount remnant of old mikvahs, of old ritual baths. Because again, you had to be pure to enter the temple. So what happened if you're not pure and you just happen to be there and find out that you're not pure or touch something that made you impure? You had a mikveh, and there were all kind of mikvahs. Actually, I was there and I visited the place, and I saw there is dozens and dozens of mikvahs because there were hundreds of people there. needing a mikveh and using a ritual bath. So you can actually see there was one side for the impure individuals coming down to the ritual bath, and then the other side going up, and with a little separation between, so impurity will not go from one spot to the other. So what you see over here, we are on the southern wall of the Temple Mount, and in this highlighted spot you can see a remnant of the entrance of a door. And why is it so significant? Because we know that on the southern side there were 5 doors, known as the Sha'are Hulda, the doors of Hulda. Why Hulda? For 2 reasons. One reason is, the history tells us that there was a woman, she was a prophet, and her name was Hulda, and she sat there giving words of prophecies and inspiration to people who came to seek her guidance. And after her, those doors were named, those entrances were named Hulda. Another reason, Hulda means a mouse. And those doors served as an underground tunnel to enter the Temple Mount. Now you'll tell me, I don't understand. Why do you need those entrances and why do you need a tunnel? We've got earlier this beautiful arch that took you right on top of the Temple Mount, right? And the answer is, the arch didn't take you to the Temple Mount and the temple. They only took you to that convention center. Now from the convention center, if you were there, which was also on tap, you couldn't, there was no access to the actual Temple Mount and eventually the temple. Why?
Well, it was sacred. This temple is sacred, cannot just anybody.
Very good. Because the temple is sacred, so the sages at that time felt that people coming to the convention, I call it the convention center, but people coming to those rooms to socialize, to do all kind of things, and then to be busy with all kind of things, they may not end up to be pure and ready enough to enter straight from there the temple. So they said no. From great idea, do your center, do your things, fine, do your business, no problem, do your meetings, anything you want to do. But if you want to enter the temple, you're going to go out and you're going to go back from the southern side, and from there you enter under the convention center, under those rooms. There was kind of a tunnel, and it took you to the other side. It took you to the Temple Mount. So this is another reason why they were called Hulda, as a mouse, just like a mouse would go in from. So I said there were 5. The 3 that you see at the edges over there, sorry, not at the edges, but the 3 that you see at the end, right, on the right side, they were in order to go in, and the 2 that you see right over here, they were in order to go out. In front of those doors, there were steps, and those steps are there until today. Those steps were in order to go out or to go up, whatever it was. Do you see anything unusual about those steps?
Not dangerous to walk on, they don't seem to.
They have like a separation.
Okay, because they probably were a bit damaged, with time. Anything else unusual? Maybe if you take a look here from the side.
It's elevated. It looks like there's a hole, a bigger hole under the last one.
Very good. See, that one is a larger step versus the one after that, which is way narrower, way shorter. And if you take a look along those steps, you will see that some of them are large, some of them are narrow, large, narrow. They're not following a pattern. Why is that? The answer is the sages came up with an idea. When you leave the temple, it is disrespectful to run.
It's dangerous. It would be dangerous to run.
It will also be dangerous, but it is disrespectful for the holiness to just go out and quickly and rush to your next thing. So when you have got steps that are
Treacherous.
yes, you'll have to go down and be concentrated where you're walking slowly and be able to, and this is the reason they build those. So when you actually go there, I mean, this is, you read that in the books, but you go there and you see them. I was with Malky, and Malky saw it for the first time. I saw it the year before. I said to Malky, take a look. I mean, just see. What we learned about. It's right here. It's right here. It didn't change. It's the same stones, the same thing. It remained till today. It's just something that I can't get over it because of the. Here, so going back to the doors of Hulda, here you can see actually the entrance or a remnant of the entrance. It has been filled up with the time. Okay, you have to understand. On top of this is the mosque of Al-Aqsa. On the Temple Mount there is two mosques: Mosque of Al-Aqsa and Mosque of Omar. The Mosque of Omar is a big golden one that sits right on the Holy of the Holiest, the best place. Right? And then you've got one that is closer to the southern wall, which is the Masjid Al-Aqsa, the Mosque of Al-Aqsa. And basically there is no access whatsoever from that spot to the Temple Mount. It has been completely blocked, as you can see, with the little stones right here. Not just for political reason we can't get there, but also for halachic reason. According to Jewish law, we are not pure today. We don't have the process of purification, and therefore it will be forbidden for a Jew to actually access the Temple Mount. Okay? The surrounding, this is no problem, this is where we are, this is where we spend, this is where we pray, etc. But the top of the Temple Mount, which is the area, you can't. Today you can't. For a Jew,
Sharon did.
It's prohibited according to Torah. And myself personally, I never went there. And until Moshiach, I won't be able to go there. But when Moshiach will come, we'll all be able to actually purify ourselves properly and then be able to enter the Temple Mount. By the way, you wonder, where is the mountain? I can understand the temple was once there, but where is the mountain? There is no mountain. There is one large platform surrounded by walls and all kind of houses. Where is the Temple Mount? So this is actually something we're going to discuss a bit later. But before, let me back it up. This mountain, whatever mountain, is also called Har HaMoriah, Mount Moriah. Mount Moriah is known in history for many, many things, including this is on top of this mountain, precisely at this spot where, precisely at this spot where Abraham took his son Isaac and was requested by God to offer Isaac as an offering known as the binding of Yitzchak, Akedat Yitzchak. It took place, as the Bible tells us, on Har HaMoriah, on Mount Moriah, which is also the Temple Mount. On that mountain, Cain and Hevel brought their offering. Cain and Hevel were the two children of Adam and Eve, and the story goes with their offerings and the whole story behind it. It took place on Mount Moriah. Something else to know is that Noah, when Noah came out from part of the city, just so you know, in case you've been in Israel, Here is the spot of the Kotel, of the Western Wall. This is the Kotel Plaza. This is where people gather and go to pray every day. This is basically a portion, we are going to talk about that soon, a portion of the walls of the Temple Mount. Okay? I'm going to clarify what that means soon. But yes, it is a flat area that is elevated from the other part of the city.
I thought, but I don't know if I'm right, that there was a mount, then they built wall
Very
and
good.
filled it in,
Very
made it
good.
flat.
Very good, very good. We will see that actually in a few slides. Okay. So, recently, for the past 200 years, there have been extensive archaeological work around the Temple Mount. You can see over here, this is the area of the most intensive archaeological research, which is the southern side of the Temple Mount. So this would be the western side, this would be the southern side, and the corner of the western to the southern walls of the Temple Mount is where most of the archaeological research is taking place. Okay? So many of those things, many of those spots that we are going to discuss are actually spots that are around this area, which has been discovered through the archaeological find of the past 200 years, but even more recently, the past 50 years or so. Let's begin with the Western Wall. Okay? The Western Wall that you can see over here is only a portion of the wall. In fact, below the plaza, there is another few meters that is going down, and this is something you can see when you go through the Minharota Kotel, when you go through the Kotel tunnels. You can actually go down below the surface of this plaza and see how the walls is continuing several meters under the ground. Very, very, very deep. This is the Kotel. This is considered today one of the holiest places in Judaism. This is the place that thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands of millions of Jews are going there to pray. Jews are going there to pray every day. There are celebrations taking place there, bar mitzvahs, bat mitzvahs, and all kinds of ceremonies. This is a holy place because of the proximity to the Holy Temple, because of the proximity, as you will see soon, to that spot of the holy of the holiest. Okay, but something I want to clarify first is the Teva. Noah built a mizbeach, an altar on this mount. Noah. This is also the place where Adam Arishon, Adam, was created on and from. So just imagine the history of mankind began there on Mount Moriah. Now, through the years, yes, a question.
Is it a flat area or is it elevated?
Okay. So since you asked the question, I was about to clarify, but a bit later, but since you asked the question, I'm going to clarify it right now. Yes, what you see over here from here, this wall, this is the northern wall. This is, well, here, the western wall. this is the southern wall, and over there is the eastern wall, okay? All along. So basically, all this is a flat area surrounded by walls, as you can see it. And so, by nature, definitely elevated from this part
outside.
of the city,
Okay.
from this part. Welcome, and I'm happy to present this presentation, virtual tour of the Temple Mount, the Holy Temple, and a day with the Kohanim. So, just as you know, this is a three-part course. Okay, this week we are going to take an archaeological tour of the Temple Mount. Next week, the Holy Temple itself. And then the third lesson, we are going to take a trip with the Kohanim. We are going to follow the priest inside the temple to see their schedule and what was going on over there. In order to appreciate the temple and the structure of the temple, you just have to understand, first of all, where you are, and that takes us to the Temple Mount and the archaeological finds of the Temple Mount, which is what we are going to focus tonight. So let's begin with a little bit of history. Here what you have is a recent picture of the Temple Mount. So when I say Temple Mount,